Okay, so back to cosmology, right? Like the idea that we are subject to, right? When one senses the universe surrounding them, the atmosphere, and kind of they adopt the lingual inclusion of things because they're a lingual fact, like the word space. They grant it something. They grant it as a thing, right? But factually, in terms of reference, where one might have to fall into their ego, their egotic scientific load, in order to understand the idea that when they're referencing nothing or empty space, that nothing, although it surrounds the planet, it's a misnomer to say space surrounds the planet as much as to say there's bodies in relationship to one another, right? And that we know these bodies because of, we pluralize the bodies from body to bodies and say one is over there and one is here in the same empirical demonstrative fashion that we describe, this bottle's relationship to my head or to my ass or to you. And so the hoodwinking in this place, once again, is the separation between the lingual calling of a thing and the facts, the objective facts. And so when one falls into what I'll say is a spiritualism, and they identify themselves as sole, like, central locution of the universe, right? They're my hand, I'm reaching out, I'm doing things. You have your hands, you reach out and do things. We know the limits of our bodies because we describe them and we talk about them. And then we get into what would say like a paralinguistic description of, sharing air and sharing heat and sharing magnetism and sharing words and meaning and so forth. Gets this kind of involvement, almost like to say the way two magnets, we can see them attract and we can see how they relate to each other. Where the sun and our rotation around the sun, it was, we didn't say it was a magnetic force, we just noticed that it was the case. And so
should we say this is the cosmos? Should we start with that? Should we start with what isn't? So we're not left with everything. Because if we're going to talk about everything, then we don't have anything to talk about. I was thinking that as far as myth and legends, about any narrative story, any historic story that we can relate to, stars in the sky, and ancients, the Egyptians, philosophy, to natural science or science in general, I guess covers that, as long as it somehow triangulates to that up there, right? I mean, that's our discussion, right? It's not all of this, it's not everything, because if it does, like I said, to talk about, but how would you like the imagination? The reality of the imagination means to what extent, to what point the reality of the imagination, even well beyond that. That's what we speak. Imagine as ethics. You had mentioned that cosmology will run into ethics, and I was just kind of wondering to what extent you felt that that ethics was a necessary associative category to apply to the cosmos. Yeah, if I get an idea of why it is an author's making an association through a literary device or trope, if you will, any associative connection that's found by putting one text next to another in a conventional read, why it is you would think that association, because it can be made, is made, or how to better put it, because somebody sees an association, why do you feel like it's important and necessary for you to accept it? If an author comes to a particular realization or conclusion and you read your eyes over that author, do you necessarily think to yourself, like, that's something that I'm going to align myself with? That's something that I'm, focusing your energy around a particular word in order to exude a content relationship, your reiteration of that word. And if imagination is what you're extracting from one head, you want to apply it to your own thesis through another author's association, and that's the stacking process that academia requires every individual to go through. It's almost as if they can't reach outside of the canonized version. You can only utilize authors that are considered accepted within the canon. If you took an author that was so far gone or not necessarily put into the academic faults or alter, right? If you started referencing novelists, perhaps that might be an entirely different sort of game. So, I guess what I'm getting at by this is when you're going to speak of cosmology, I'm going to be really curious when you use the word is and the word the, and when you're making declarative statements that you believe, or that you're going to lay a logos track down as first a statement of the case, and then a statement that applies to that statement that is the case, right? Like you have to have some axiomatic, paradigmatic ground from which to start the thrust of your conversation. Now, your narrative track can start a cohesive wandering about anything that you would like it to. The narration is so important that the author has story and has patterning, and so I guess
here's the idea. This is the question, not only to you, but let's say to Anton, right? On a more serious scale. If one's particular phenomenological locution in the universe, including the space, sees itself as subject, then and meaning is derived in whatever capacity that phenomenological entity is able to absorb language and parse it out through reason. At what point does reason itself have a fissure and a break and a collapse such that all meaning of all things in coincidence takes on such a gravity, such a control, where irrationality and schizophrenia, by very definition, where irrationality splinters through one's universe in this gravitational collapse of meaning, right? If you're not going to allow a fissure of reason, you're going to buttress yourself phenomenologically, subjectively, interiority, with narrative dialogues that are scoping out the landscape as opposed to collapsing in and of themselves, then you're aspect blind to the possibility of the schizophrenic approach to say, I am that part of the universe that is schizophrenic, right? We are that part of the universe that is schizophrenic. We are that part of the universe that is unreasonable, irrational.
But as you're focusing off of imagination or other key words that you're centric around from which to exemplify a point, and then bring in a narrative of academic historic considerations of what cosmology first of all is, and then what it is to include. I'll be, of course, noting that
Pentagram, Stars of David, that's the orthodox cosmology. With symbolism and with symbolism, one might suggest that with symbol.
show two pyramids that fall into a hexagram, and then this is supposed to show two pyramids as hyperbola or hyperbola that fall into spiral, and then this is the hyperbola noted as 6 points, and then as 5 points for hexa and pentagram results, and then this is a diagonal dodecadodecahedron showing a hexagram in the center with two derivative pentagrams, and then this is an overlay of a hexagram and a pentagram, and then when you minus the horizontal lines, you get a unicurse.
Sweet, man. Data 1, man. 3% data. In Lisbon.
Actually, that's not even my real accent.
Oh, well, good on you. That sounds wonderful. Only go till 5 a.m. And then we have to disperse.
I'd love to dance with you, honey. That's right, honey. Your whisper's beating up. Don't you like it when I grab you there, honey? Oh, this right. Let's tango, baby.